Welcome to the next masterclass as we talk about the art of driving people to action. Brought to you by Profit Master Global Outsourcing, providing premium offshoring solutions. My name is Paul Jansz, and thank you for joining us today. Now, we've got a massive show in front of us over the next hour or so. We're going to be with a leadership and life coach, and then we're going to be talking about the art of driving people to action. And I know for most people, whether they've been in management roles or leadership roles, it is an art. And I think there's action, and then there's the right type of action as well that we want to make sure that people are doing. So we're going to be sharing a lot with you over the next hour or so. If you were joining us for the first time, welcome. And let me share a little bit about our masterclasses, which have grown and grown and grown. This probably started, to be fair, probably 2 or 3 years ago now, where Richard Croker, the CEO and founder of Profit Master Global Outsourcing, and I got together and we said, well, what can we do together from an educational point of view? And we decided to launch a podcast series, which we did. This podcast series is also on the YouTube channel for Profit Master. If you go on there and have a look, type in Profit Master Global Outsourcing, it'll pop up. So we did a 2-part podcast series, which was just an audio series, pre-recorded. And then we decided to raise the bar on that and do a live masterclass session, which we commenced this year in 2024. So if you've missed anything in the past as well, please go to the YouTube page. Every single month, I have a different subject matter expert, and we talk about different matters around people. So this is all free educational content to anyone that wants to learn more about how they can manage and lead people. So I do encourage you to have a look at it. And anything you want to have a look at in the past, go back and have a look at that as well. So you might be thinking, who is Profit Master Global Outsourcing? Give me 30 seconds and I'll quickly explain. So Profit Master provides premium offshoring solutions to help you guys as business owners, to help you build your global team. Now, it's something that over the last probably 6, 7, 8 months now, we've been talking about this building your global teams. I think more and more businesses are looking to do that, whether that is, because you know that you can get an increase in productivity, whether that is because you can get an a decrease in costs. And I believe if you can get a decrease in cost and an increase in productivity, that usually leads to increased profitability. So they're the sort of things that Profit Master does, and they help you to do that. So if there's something that you want to know, check out Profit Master Global Outsourcing, and they can help you to, again, either help you establish or to grow your current offshore team. Today's topic, let's talk about it. The art of driving people to action. Let me introduce you to our guest. He's a leadership and life coach, and he's online. Eugene Wong, welcome.
Hi, Paul. It's so good to be here.
It is fantastic to have you here, mate. So we've got a lot to cover. We've got about, what are we sitting at? We're 12:04. So we've got a lot of time to get through a lot, but it's going to be fantastic. And to everyone listening, again, I hope you, however you wish to take notes, the recording will also go into post-production and be out in about 48 hours. So you've got the ability to go back and have a look at this as well. But if you're writing, if you're taking notes, get ready because we've got a lot to share with you. So Eugene, before we kick off, are you okay to share a little bit about you and your background?
Oh, yeah. I have a mongrel breed of a background. I actually cut my teeth as a lawyer in the corporate world, and then moved from there into doing social work and community development work. I ran a theatre company for 15 years as a community development tool. And throughout that entire period, it was all about how do we shape culture? How do we make an impact on society that lasts for generations? That's my obsession in life. So I've worked within local councils and NGOs as well. And now it just seems like a natural progression to say, well, I don't have the energy to be at the forefront of running a theatre company or something like that. Yeah. But hopefully I've got the wisdom and the experience to be able to speak into leaders and help them to leverage their resources and their energy to be more effective.
Yeah, well said, well said. And I think, most teams, I think when we go into business as entrepreneurs, we want to start our own business. We get into that stage where it's just us. And then we've got to develop this model where we employ people. We might take our first step. It's a part-time, then it's a full-time. And then suddenly you end up 5 years later and you may end up with a team of 5, or you might end up with a team of 55. But as you mentioned before, the ability to build that culture and then to work together as a team to achieve the objectives of the company are so important. And I think that's some of the key areas we're going to touch on today, aren't they?
Yeah, totally. It's all about that. I'm a fiend for culture, really,
Yeah.
within organizations. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting one as well, because sometimes people get a little bit what's the word I can use? Mystified, if that's the right word, over, a lot of people say, oh yeah, we take our people out to lunches and we do drinks on a Friday night and we have a fruit bowl and these sorts of things. And, I don't know your opinion on this. My opinion, that's not culture. Okay. That is a part of what you could do, but it doesn't drive culture in the way that we believe that action needs to happen and teamwork needs to take place as well. So
Yeah.
we're going to get into that. So let's get into that. Our headline and subject line is the art of driving people to action. So let's get straight into that. But I believe it is a challenge. And I mentioned it before with regards to, managers or leaders would find this difficult. I mentioned before that, there's people that take action and then there's also people that take the right type of action. Are you okay to share with us what your thoughts on the subject heading, the art of getting people to take action?
Yeah, I think ultimately, as a leadership coach, everything that I do is really centered around influence. And influence is the number one commodity that we have. It's the most valuable commodity that we have in the world today. So you can claim to be a leader, and you can have a great vision and head in that direction with great gusto. But if no one's following you, you're really just taking a walk in the park. And a lot of leaders don't realize that. They think that it's all about the the title. Whereas I deal with a lot of people who don't have the title and yet they still lead and they shape organizations, just they don't get the credit for it.
Yeah.
So becoming a really good leader, I think, and inspiring people to take action is really about relationship at the end of the day. It's understanding people and connecting with them in a meaningful way.
So interesting. So about relationships and understanding people. So I suppose the first thing I think about that is, I sort of go back to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and Stephen Covey, and he talks about, seek first to understand. So that's about asking questions. And I think, for those of us that are parents, and I've got 3 young boys, most people online probably know I've got 3 boys. And yeah, kids ask good questions, don't they? But as we tend to get a little bit older and as into adulthood, we don't tend to ask as many questions, do we?
Yeah, we're not very good at that.
No.
I think our curiosity gets beaten out of us. In fact, the stats on leaders are that, when you're in your late 20s and up to kind of your mid 30s, the growth trajectory of people is actually quite large, because they're trying to suck up as much information as they can. But after the age of 30, and definitely after the age of 35, it peters out. And what they've found is that the performance of managers and leaders actually goes downhill. And the reason why is because they think that they know it all. And so they become unteachable.
Yeah, yeah.
They stop asking questions. They stop being able to pivot and to shift things up. And they start thinking with a really fixed mindset rather than a growth mindset.
Okay.
It's fascinating to observe in different organizations.
Yeah, I like that. So a fixed mindset as opposed to a growth mindset. So yeah, look at it, and I think you're right. It's I suppose we can always. The great part about listening to these and wanting to have that growth mindset is to almost do the self-reflection on yourself and ask yourself. And everybody online could do the same thing. Do I have a fixed or do I have a growth mindset? Am I continually looking for growth opportunities, or as not Stephen Covey, sorry, just gone blank. Anthony Robbins talks about, the can I, constant and never ending improvement. So is that something that you are constantly looking, even at 55? Yeah, look, I do. I'm also always looking to grow, not from my kids, but from outside influences, from the people around me. And yeah, that curiosity mindset is a really interesting one that, we got to continue to, while it may be beaten out of us, we've got to make sure that we continually come back to that and always think about, well, what can I learn? What can I do more? How can I learn from you today? And I think that's what we've got to continually ask ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah. And Paul, 55 is young.
Yes, very true.
Yeah, you've got plenty of time to go. I remember watching Avatar, the original movie. That's 2.5 hours of my life I won't get back. But there was one line in it where they were referring to it's really difficult to fill a cup that's already full. So if you already think that you know everything, there is no way you're going to receive anything new. And so I really love that curiosity of saying it doesn't matter. It's why I will never refer to myself as an expert in anything. I have expertise in several things.
Yes.
But I don't ever want to say, oh, I've made it and that's it now. Because that puts a cap on your growth.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it just means it's not as much fun. when you're approaching something with curiosity, it's either curiosity or it's judgment. So if you're not curious, you're probably making judgment calls on things. And so it throws wonder out the window. And we don't often talk about the concept of wonder within business circles.
Yep.
But that's where all the innovation's at.
Yeah, I love it. Even, I know we're only 13 minutes in, but just the bit that we've all, be able to share just then, the curiosity or judgment alone is powerful. Again, this is the great thing about listening to these sorts of masterclasses where, we can reflect on this. And while we're talking, I'm sure everybody can be listening to this and asking themselves, are they of a curious mindset or are they of a judgment mindset? So it's brilliant.
Yeah. And it changes by the day. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure, and that's the key thing about making sure we're in the present as well. Mate, you mentioned, you're talking about good leaders just then, and high performing teams are usually empowered by good leaders. What makes up a good leader?
Good question. There's been a fair bit of research that's been done on this, and I think the major one that was done, 51% of people came up with the same answer, which is really interesting. They had all sorts of different leadership traits that were listed, and by far the biggest one was honesty, which I wouldn't have necessarily thought of as the first choice.
Yeah.
But there's something about an honest talker, like a straight talker, that makes you feel safe. They might be an absolute prat of a person, but at least you know where you stand with them, and they're not trying to people please you. They're not trying to fudge it, right? Then beyond that, I think it's forward looking. So someone who has some vision and isn't going to wallow in the mistakes that you've made. It's okay, well, this is all gone to pieces. What can we do right now? And that's been really great. I think the third is competence. So, and it's interesting, the competence comes, that far down the list. And then the fourth is inspiring. Someone who can really cast a vision that stirs people up and they want to follow. So those are the key things. I would say usually when you start a job, most people, mailroom level jobs, or when you're a new graduate, you try to build up your technical skills because you're doing the stuff. And so you work at that, and then you become quite good at technical skills, and then you get promoted to a managerial position. And that's where a lot of people start flailing because they're just good technicians.
Yes.
They know how to make widgets. They don't know how to manage other people. It's a whole different skill set. And so managerial stuff is more relational. And in fact, the middle managers have the hardest job because they have to manage down, but they also have to manage up.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge. And then by the time you get to executive level, then you're looking at more strategic stuff. And so you can even get away with not being so good with the relational stuff. Although I think relational interactions, they need to carry through if you want it to be really healthy. And then by the time you get to the very top, I would say being a visionary, the Steve Jobs of the world, the Elon Musks of the world. And you can see that, both of them were pretty poor on the relational side, but they got away with it because they were such visionaries.
Yes.
So I think there are 5 accepted points for a good leader, which is you need to model the way, show that you are true to what you're saying. It's not a do as I say, not what I do.
Yes.
You need to be able to inspire a shared vision. So a vision that's really compelling is going to draw people together. If you don't have a compelling vision, you'll end up having someone else rise up with a different vision, and it creates 2 visions within the one company, which is known as division or division. Yes. So weak leadership causes fractures within your own business. Then I would say the third one is being able to challenge the process. So it's great to have tradition, and to know that we've got a system that works. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But you also need to be able to innovate. And so being able to say, yeah, we've got this process, but it's not a sacred cow for us. Maybe we should cook up steak for lunch and then find something else to work with. So once you've got healthy processes and constantly evolving processes, then empowering your staff, and enabling your staff in a healthy way, so that they feel that they can own it themselves.
Yes.
And then encouraging them. And most leaders that I know, most people in managerial roles don't encourage their staff enough, because they just assume that everyone knows that they're appreciated.
So let's touch on that for a second. So when you're talking about encouragement, and you're right, some people have trouble doing that as well. What do you see or mean or can share with regards to the word of encouragement?
Yeah, different people need different things.
Yeah.
So if you look at, say, DISC personality profiling, someone who is a highly dominant personality, so go-getter, gung-ho, really, really just wants to achieve things, they don't need you to hold their hand all the way through. They'll get really annoyed, actually, if you do. But they do want a trophy. They want a certificate on the wall. They want people to know that they're really good, right? As opposed to, there are some people who would be mortified if you mentioned them in front of everyone else, and they're more interested in knowing that you care about them personally. Those sorts of things. Yeah. So looking at their personality profile, I think is really useful. The other thing that I've found useful in organizations that I've been part of is understanding the 5 love languages. I don't know if you've come across that book before, but it's saying different people respond to different things.
Yep.
Some people are words of affirmation. That's great.
Yep.
Tell everyone about it. Other people are touch. So this is not, go and cuddle people in the office. That's not encouraging that. But there are some people where a pat on the back or a high five is actually more powerful than even a financial bonus.
Yep.
Other people are about quality time. So taking them out for lunch and saying, hey, this is special time that you get to spend with the boss because you're really great. Some people are gifts. I know I used to have a box of Ferrero Rocher chocolates in my desk, and I would just bring them around and they'd get a single chocolate, but for some people that is everything.
So true.
And then the last one's acts of service. Yep. So to show someone that you really appreciate them, it might be, No, how about you head off early and I'll cover this for you.
Yep.
They will remember that for ages.
Yep.
And what that does for them on a heart level is well beyond what a bonus will do for them.
That's quite fascinating for me to hear that, because I suppose yeah, the five love languages is something that I've always been aware of in the book, and it usually comes in from a, call it, a personal relationship point of view. And I probably learned a lot more of that as I got a little bit older, as opposed to when I was younger. And I think that's what a bit of grey hair does, I suppose. You learn from life experiences, but I've never thought about it within the workplace and understanding other people's love language. It's not only about yours, it's about understanding other people's. And I think we've probably done a lot of that disc profiling. You mentioned it, or whether it be the Herman membrane. There's a lot of different profilings out there. Are you still a big fan of like teams doing that to understand whether they are a D, I, S, or C?
I do like it. I find that to be probably the most practical to use in
Yeah,
offices. Like you can do your Myers-Briggs, but no one knows what to do with it once they
that's
know
right.
the
Yeah.
category. The other one that I find really useful is the Enneagram,
Okay.
which is, it's 9 personality types plus right wing and left wing. So like it it changes depending on whether you are in a good place or in a bad place. So I find that fascinating. So it's
Yeah.
effectively 27 different personality types.
And
Um,
that's often a challenge again for people. You talk about that one, and I know personally, having managed businesses and led businesses, it is a difficult one, because a lot of us, maybe a lot more people, are working from home and sort of watching the TV this morning. A lot of, whether it be Sydney or whether it be Melbourne, trying to get people back into the city. It's, I heard someone call Melbourne tumbleweed town on a Monday and a Friday this morning. And I could, as I don't know, actually, let's not go into that. But the idea was that, can you believe I've just lost my train of thought? Um, how can we probably understand people more and provide them what they're looking for? And I think that's, whether it's that, that's probably where DISC comes into it, isn't it? And I know we only did it recently with a firm that we were coaching as well. And I think it's, if you guys want to look into it, whoever's online, if you haven't done it before, and it's worth doing, whether it's every 12 months or every 18 months or whatever it may be, but it's only like $100 per person as well, or it could be $80 per person. So it's not even that expensive to do. So I think it's a great tool to use, isn't it?
yeah. The other tool that some people might find really useful is the Strengths Finder quiz. So Morgan Gallup poll, the people who do all the
Oh yeah.
research,
Yeah.
they interviewed, I think it was 100,000 managers across the globe, trying to find the secret source of what makes someone a really good manager. And they got back all the results and then realized everybody's doing different things. We almost don't have any data that we can use here, but they kept digging into it, and eventually they realized nearly all of the high performing managers were high performing because they were operating in their areas of strength and were outsourcing everything else.
Interesting.
So, outsourcing is totally the way to go.
Yep.
And it's following the 80-20 rule. So if you can achieve 80% of the effort on 20% of 80% of the results on 20% of the effort, then just multiply that 20% by 5 and then ship out everything else, get someone else to do it.
Yes.
Uh, and so with Morgan Gallup poll, they created this test, and I think there are 32 or 36 different strengths. And they just ask you one of those monotonous surveys that it feels like you're being asked the same question over and over again. But then they give you your top 5, and it's really
Interesting.
freeing to be able to be released to do that and say, okay, I know that I'm a gun at these, and I'm not trying to waste time doing something that I'm not good at.
Spot on. Spot on. And it's a funny thing you should say that, because one, I got my train of thought back, but two, I was actually chatting to a company about that only this morning, about how we could work out what are the key areas of strengths for this particular individual, and then what are the areas that we would then jot down that can be given to somebody else at a lower level, and this is where offshoring comes into it, doesn't it? Because like you said before, you've got the ability then to give that task to somebody else for you to work at a higher task, which then comes back to those statistics you just mentioned.
Yeah. As long as you know how to empower that person well.
Yeah.
So it's all about the good communication. I think a lot of people delegate and they think there's no responsibility attached to the delegation.
Correct.
And so the way that my old mentor used to talk about it was I was given a lead that was long enough to do stuff, but I actually ended up feeling like I was hanging from a limb. I was just left hanging because there was no relationship past that point.
Yep.
And for people to feel safe within a workplace, they actually need to feel that someone's actually watching them to a degree.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they have that ability to, if they feel a little bit lost, that they can actually come back to that person and ask a question as well. So I think that, again, your language around the feeling safe in that environment is actually important, because I suppose I don't find too many people that want to set people up to fail, but by sometimes a lack of awareness, that's what happens.
And we're seeing huge shifts between the generations now. So this is the first time that we've got 4 different generations in the workplace at the same time. I think it's between Gen Y and Gen Z. So this is people about 45 years down to 15. They make up 61% of the workforce now.
Wow.
And meanwhile, you got boomers at the very top end of the workplace, and they've grown up under very different conditions. And so often they have quite a fixed mindset. And so they're complaining so much about these millennials. They just don't make sense. You know, Gen Z, they're always attached to their screens. And they don't understand that the different generations are productive in different ways. And yeah, so this is just one of the things of getting an understanding and having the relationship there.
Yep.
That will release
Agree.
a level of productivity.
And you're right. That's again really good stats to know that, 61%. So there's no doubt the world has changed from that point of view, and there are a new set of skills and mindset that new leaders, let's say boomer leaders, would need to learn and develop. What's your thoughts on how they go about, that need to develop and learn?
Yeah, you're gonna hate this. It really is about listening. It's, empathy is a key thing now. And I guess you could say in the 80s, the big deal was IQ. Everyone's talking about how smart you are. That's great. And then early 2000s, we hit emotional intelligence, and that book came out, and suddenly it's all about understanding yourself and your own, what's going on within yourself, and that led to social intelligence, understanding how to connect with other people and interact with them well. We've moved past that now, and I think for the last 5 to 10 years we've actually moved into cultural intelligence.
Okay.
So as and the onset of Netflix and globalization means we've got people and Zoom calls means we don't think twice about having meetings with people overseas. And we're now living in a post Me Too, post Black Lives Matter world where it's really easy to get cancelled. So if you don't understand culture, you can actually damage your entire brand or destroy your business overnight. And now, over the last 5 years, I think, we've started to see the emergence of generational intelligence. So understanding that there are different cultures between the generations, and that's becoming really massive now, especially as a lot of boomers, refer to Gen Y and Gen Z as being snowflakes. And they end up making psychologically unsafe workplaces because their blind spot are actually dragging down the entire workplace culture.
Yeah.
But they're blaming everybody else for it.
And I think that's an important point, isn't it? To make sure that there isn't that blame. And I think the key word you used just before was empathy. So, and understand. So
Yeah.
it's a funny thing that it could all lead back to what we spoke about at the start, which was you brought up DISC. And it's a funny thing, even before you brought that up, my brain was going there. So it's a funny thing that, but yeah, that not a lot of businesses use it anymore, but I still feel that can add so much value into understanding.
Yeah. If you think of it this way, any relationship or any communication is me trying to connect with you.
Yep.
So if I don't know who I am, then I'm not going to have a message to share in the first place. This is why clarity of vision, clarity of your mission statement, all that sort of stuff is so important, right? But if I don't know anything about you, you could be a German speaker for all I know. And so I'm just shouting louder and louder at you,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean the message is getting across.
No.
So the better that I understand you, the better I can meet you at your level. It's actually really honoring when I do that. You know, I remember going to Japan years ago and speaking really broken Japanese to them. And the same thing happened in France, speaking French. So, yeah, like if you ask someone in France something in English, they'll say, "Oh, no, 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 no," you know, and they'll claim they don't understand. But we went over and tried to speak French, and they would always respond to us in English, but they appreciated that we tried. And so we got really good treatment all the way through France.
Yeah.
The same thing happens in the workplace. So if you're saying it's my way or the highway, then you've already broken relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good point. It's a good point.
And
now, mate, I've heard you talk about building a narrative. Are you okay to expand a little bit more on that?
yeah, I guess I'd need to know a little bit about narrative, and my business is named after it. Really, the world that we live in is all about stories. Right from when we're babies, we are trained to suck up stories, right? And narrative draws in both the left and the right hand side of the brain. So it's actually a much smarter way of learning, and it's a much smarter way of getting a message across. But in terms of the narratives that are running through our heads, the stories that run through our heads, every day you're subjected to what, 8,000 different stories that you're being told through advertising. And most of those ads are telling you that you are inadequate unless you buy this product. They're saying it in different ways. Maybe you're not as sexy as this person. Maybe you're not as, you don't have as much prestige as this person, whatever. But that's what it's saying. And the strongest narrative is going to win. So if you buy into the fact that, this Ford the Toyota Hilux with scantily clad woman draped over the bonnet, that's going to make me a real man, then you're going to go out and buy that. But if your sense of identity is actually really well grounded, you're not going to be shaken by that.
Yeah.
And so it's about having a story that's within you that runs so deep that the other stories just become, white noise, I guess.
Yes. Yes.
But I think narratives work on 3 different levels. So there's your own personal narrative. So that's what you might think of as worldviews or your mindset, your self-narrative. Oh, I'm such an idiot, that sort of thing. Or, yeah, I'm totally the best. Why wouldn't anyone love me? They're very different mindsets that shape the way that you view the whole world. And so if you can conquer that, then you've got self-leadership down pat. Like you can manage yourself well. Well done, gold star. To expand your influence beyond that, you're starting to look at, say, organizational leadership, which is the message that you share or the narrative that you build within your business. That's all about culture. What's our vision? What's our mission? This is why people stick, their value statement on the wall of their office, and then no one ever follows it. But Uh, but it's trying to get that story out there and drill that in. So if you can unite people around that narrative, then you're going to have a coherent workforce that that all moves in the same direction and is on the same team.
I
Then
agree with that as
beyond,
well. Because when you hear a strong narrative, you can resonate with it. It has an emotional connection, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah, and the emotions are actually what end up making people act.
Yes.
You know, we always uh we always act based on emotions, and then our logical brain fills in all the gaps and tries to justify why this was a highly logical response. You know, and I just impulse bought a car. Why? Oh, yes, because I obviously needed it, but it was, you know, it was a stock take sale or something like that, and I was being pressured on the spot. So that's the internal story or the internal narrative of a business. And then the third level is where you start to share that narrative with people outside of your organization. And that ends up being your branding, your messaging,
Yep.
the but then also the social good that you can have on the rest of the world through what you produce or the process that you produce it through. You know, you can have ethical processes or whatever and
Yep.
set the bar for the rest of the industry. And that's where you end up moving beyond organizational leadership and into cultural leadership. That's what changes the world.
Yeah. So important. It's so
So
important.
so getting your story straight and really clear, that's what drives people ultimately to do stuff.
Yeah. Brilliant. Now, there's obviously, we spoke about statistics before, which is this will probably grab people's attention as well. People join a company as they believe in the message, and let's even say the narrative to a certain degree, yet 90% of them leave due to poor management. What's your message to that statistic?
Yeah, we are really good at measuring quantitative analysis. So let's look at the bottom line, like profit loss, right? That's fine. But we're not so good at measuring qualitative stuff. And usually the leadership style of someone is it's riddled with qualitative stuff that we don't measure. So your flaws as a leader are actually going to impact the bottom line. They will impact your profit because morale will go down. Like if you're a bad leader, morale will go down. Your team unity will get fractured. People will be less productive in the workplace, and then your retention rate is going to plummet as well.
Yep.
And every time that you need to replace a staff member, it's going to cost you between 50% and 200% of their annual salary to replace them. By the time you factor in all the lost knowledge, the wasted time that other people go through, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I actually think that managers should be judged and leaders should be judged on that entire costing. Because sometimes you get people who seal a nice deal, but you don't realize that on the back end of the organization, it's toxic and people are leaving all the time. So that manager is actually costing the business a whole stack of money. It's just not being tracked.
Yes.
So I think of it this way. I like having plants in my house, and so I buy pot plants and I largely treat them very poorly because I know nothing about how to garden, and I haven't done anything to invest into my own understanding of how to garden. So the house constantly looks a bit depressing because there are all these dying plants all over the place. And every now and again, I will just turf out that pot plant and I'll buy a new one. And so for the next few months, the house will look fantastic. I I think that we do that to workplaces and we do that with employees. So we have these miserable, dying employees in our workplaces, and they bring down the mood for everybody else. And then every now and again, we just turf them out and replace them until we break the next one. That's what happens if you have a bad manager.
Yes.
And so learning how to nurture, learning how to garden is really good. And one of these days I'll take my own advice with real plants. Yeah.
Let's bring that into, let's say, with everything that you've spoken about now, and let's say the 90% of people that may leave. So let's call that connection. Let's talk about connecting with your team, or connecting better with your team. What can you share that we can start to connect better with our teams?
I think it makes us vulnerable to trust people. If you trust someone, you're saying, I will give you autonomy to work on this. I'm not going to be a helicopter parent and just constantly hover and get in the way, which is what a lot of more overbearing managers do. So trusting them enough to give them autonomy is great. I call it the ABCs of a happy workplace. So autonomy, so that they feel like they're trusted. It helps them to trust you back, actually. The B is belonging, and just saying, I feel like people care about me. This is why understanding things like their love language, remembering their birthday, remembering where they went on holiday, and just saying, how was Fiji? Did you go to this waterfall, like I said, or remembering that their kid is sick. It's like, how's Astrid doing? Yeah. That makes them feel seen. And so it's like, oh, I really belong. The other thing is, if they're under stress, or if they have a family crisis, something like that, the amazing thing of a manager saying, you know what, take the day off, just go. I'm not even going to classify this as sick leave today. Just go early. It's not like you haven't earned it at other times anyway. That helps people to say, oh, my contribution is seen and valued.
Yes.
And therefore I belong. But alongside other staff within the business, they also have to fit with them. And so maintaining a healthy culture is so important, because if you have one bully, everybody will leave.
Yeah.
Right. Or one gossip is also another really damaging thing. So autonomy, belonging. Third thing is competence, a growing sense of competence or mastery. They need to feel like they're good, and that they are constantly growing. Otherwise, familiarity breeds contempt, and they start getting really hypercritical because they're not being stretched enough. So if you look at things like flow state, officially flow state, which is where you are working at your best, is where you're being challenged between 5 and 10% beyond what your capabilities are, which means you actually need to budget to make mistakes 5 to 10% of the time.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're not pushing yourself hard enough.
Yeah.
You're not growing. Right? Similarly, so you want to be stretching people in that way and creating a culture that makes it fine for them to, and actually they get rewarded for making mistakes. That's, you tried, and this is how we evolve.
That's right.
Mutations, right? But the other thing is you got to invest into their growth. So some people suggest that 10% of the value of any person's salary should be invested into professional development.
Yep.
Ongoing professional development all the time.
Yep.
Or just regularly. And that gives them reason to stay on as well, because they know that they're being upskilled. And at some point, if you don't create opportunities for them to use those skills, then they'll get bored and then they'll move on.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you don't upskill them, they'll be stagnant, and they may stay, but they're actually not going to be really good for your business anyway, ultimately.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's right. Very good points. And I like the ABCs. I think that's, again, pretty easy to remember and pretty easy to, put into action, I suppose, as well, isn't it?
Yeah, like a 10-point plan is never going to happen. So, so, you know, for me, ABC is just, it's short and snappy enough to be able to go, I'm actually doing well with belonging. I'm rubbish with autonomy. Okay, let's work on that.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. But again, asking questions. I think that's the greatest thing, and being curious. That's the challenge, I suppose, to everybody that's online and to everybody's in future positions. And there's going to be more younger people coming through. We could have some of the older workforce working longer nowadays as well. So there's that challenge of balance that comes into that. But I think if you can stick to that ABC, I think that's a great piece of advice.
Yeah, I and helping people to get to know each other. So the greater our self-awareness is, the more healthy our interactions are going to be with other people.
Yeah.
So yes, a manager or a leader should become more self-aware and more socially intelligent with that. Invest into that, all the people skills, what we've traditionally called soft skills, they are people skills.
Mm.
And if you don't have people skills, you are not a healthy person to have in any workplace. So I would hands down invest in that for yourself as a leader, but for all of your team as well. And that'll make them all operate at a much higher level.
It's a very good point.
And then just learning how to do life together as well. Gen Z, more than any other generation, brings their personal life into the workplace. And so the idea of a 9 to 5 job doesn't exist anymore, because you're actually not going to get their full brain the whole 9 to 5 time. You may actually, they'll be checking social media or whatever every now and again. But they also care about the ethics of the job and the culture, and does this fit with the lifestyle that I want?
Yep.
So employers no longer own them. They are providing an opportunity for Gen Z to get on board with what the employees are doing.
Yeah, I'd agree 100%.
Big shift in dynamics.
It is. Yeah, very, very big shift.
So, yeah, but allowing that social space and saying, actually, this is not wasting time. This is actually building something that will gel people together.
Yes.
And it's why after lockdowns, everyone's so desperate to get people back in the office as well, because the water cooler conversations are everything. That's where all the productivity happens, really. Yes. And what is tripping up a lot of employers at the moment is they've forced people back into the office, but they haven't realized that people changed during lockdowns, and they actually need to shift their approach to how they look after those people and how they engage them. And so they're going through the motions, but they're not actually really engaging on a real relational level. So that's an ongoing challenge, and it's actually really fun to tackle.
Yeah, I can imagine. No, we've only got about 5 minutes left before we got to go to questions. But one of the things I know that you spoke about before, you went into the different emotional intelligence and so on and so on. I'd like to talk about emotional resilience. And I know a lot of people, I've heard this term being spoken about before. Are you okay to explain to everyone online about emotional resilience?
Yeah. I think the word resilience gets bandied around a lot.
It does, yeah.
And we tend to think of it as, well, I'm tough. Things can get thrown at me and nothing will happen to me. That's not actually what resilience is. Resilience is being able to roll with the punches. So it's saying, I do get knocked down, but resilience is the measure of how quickly I can spring back once I've been knocked down. And what we're looking at now in the world is really fascinating. The younger generations, Gen Y and Gen Z, have less resilience. And, it's not just because they're snowflakes. Yeah. They are carrying a higher psychological load than they've ever had before. They're connected to world news, and they're aware of all these issues that will directly affect them. Unstable politics, world wars happening, the fact that the world is going to be out of clean water by 2050. the fact that we've got an aging population in Australia, and we are not going to be able to afford to keep boomers in their lifestyles. There aren't going to be enough, workers to pay for all of that. So their own superannuation is probably going to dry up in different ways. All sorts of things like this are going on, but they don't have control over those things. And so that's creating heightened levels of anxiety in younger generations. Plus the fracturing of society, meaning we can barely keep a family unit together, let alone keep the whole society in relationship. So people are more lonely than they've ever been before in Australia. And depression rates are going up because depression is linked to the quality of your community and your relationships.
Yep.
So you're getting people who have less of a buffer zone to deal with. They're carrying more weight, and when things go wrong, usually when you're in a good space, like someone says something rude to you, you just sort of blow it off. It's fine. But if you are not sure whether you're going to be able to pay your rent next week, you've got someone who is in your family who's got stage 4 cancer, the car's broken down, and someone says something slightly snarky to you, you're much more likely to snap back.
Yep.
And we're seeing this. I think that we're seeing this, and I've been tracking road rage rates for the last 10 to 15 years now, and seeing them go up. And at the same time, seeing domestic violence rates go up.
Yep.
There is a grief within society that is not being dealt with, and it's not being talked about in workplaces or anywhere else. And that grief, when grief isn't dealt with, then it becomes deep-seated trauma. And that is going to impact, like the lockdowns, especially the extended lockdowns in Melbourne, they're going to affect our culture for at least the next 10, maybe 15 years.
Yep.
And so psychological safety is huge. And just thinking through, well, how do we do this?
I agree. I think I lost you there for a second. You there? Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Okay. So with all of this stuff that's going on in the world and stuff that people are having to carry, then the question is, how do we make a workplace psychologically safe?
Yes.
So that it doesn't bring on more stress. But it's not enough just to make it safe, because then we all become very pampered and, wrapped in cotton wool. You also need to couple that with high levels of accountability. So say, yeah, we have high levels of trust here. I trust you, you trust me. We have each other's back. But in terms of accountability, I expect a lot of you. And there are ramifications if you don't follow through on that. But you can expect a lot of me as well.
Yep.
That breeds integrity within the workplace. Where you have both of them at the same time, that's where you have a high-performing workplace.
Okay.
And the emotional resilience comes from feeling safe. So my security in my work contract means I'm not going to get sacked at any minute, or my work conditions aren't going to get shifted at short notice without my control. Also, empowering people enough to be able to make decisions and act on their own behalf. And then I guess the other thing would be just saying we are building really tight tight relationship here. I don't really like talking about community within the workplace, because that bandied around too much and it's often not real community. But to facilitate people building real relationships between each other that can be honest and that can be vulnerable, that is actually going to make you able to operate at high speed in very difficult terrain, and people just know that they're safe and that everyone's got my back and I've got their back.
Yep.
So it's kind of like operating in the army, where if one person is not operating well, it puts everybody at risk.
Yes.
And so there's just a code of honor within that. So you have a really tight set of values and a tight culture within the business, and it becomes a safe and healthy workplace.
Brilliant. Brilliant. To all of you guys that are online, if you've got any questions, I know there's a couple of questions already put in there, but if you've got anything you want to throw into the Q&A, throw it in there now. We're going to get to questions pretty soon. I'm going to go quickly to Eugene to ask him as we look to wrap up in the next 5 minutes or so. Top three, I know we've spoken about a lot. Okay, so can you identify a top three? It's a good question. Top three that people could take away with them and look to implement in the next 48 hours? What do you think as people put some questions in?
Oh, okay. With the next 48 hours, you make it easy for me, don't you? I would say I would get clarity on what the values are of the organization. So because without clear vision and without clear values, you're a rudderless ship. And no one's going to unite behind that. So either get clear about them or make sure that you do something to make them clear to everybody else.
Okay.
When I ran a company with 100 people reporting to me, I spent more than half my time vision casting continually. I just felt like a broken record. But over the span of 6 months, we actively sought to do this. And then after that time, I heard people saying the same thing, but in their own language.
Right.
And that was when I knew that they were fully owning it. It was fantastic. And I was able to ease off.
Yeah, brilliant.
So the values and the vision,
yep.
I would say maybe do a stock take of what you know about your team. I have notes in my address book on my phone saying so-and-so really loves pistachio gelati. So-and-so is a rabid baseball fan. Don't mention the Red Sox. Yep. All that sort of stuff. So that when I want to show recognition, I can deliver gelati, pistachio gelati here. Yep. And I can specifically send a cap with the Red Sox cap to this person because I know it's going to piss them off so much. That's our personal joke. So yeah, working on understanding your stuff. And then the third one, which I think is the most important, but it's the slow burn, I would say, is work on your own awareness. The more aware you are and the more confident you are in being able to do the people skills,
yep,
then the more safe other people will feel around you and the more compelled they will be to follow you.
Brilliant. Well, we've got a series of different questions coming through. And again, hopefully that can help everybody. Look, we'll probably end up going a little bit over 1 o'clock. So hopefully stick with us. Let me just get to this one from Damien's asked one. If you're feeling like you're doing a good job with leadership of a team, but struggle to break through with one particular long-standing employee to get better engagement, how would you approach improving the dynamic with that one individual? And at what point do you make the call that there isn't really much more you can do?
Yeah, there's it's a multifaceted thing. So there's a type of communication that's known as nonviolent communication, which is non-accusatory. So you highlight what their behavior is, and you highlight very calmly and coolly what the ramifications are every time they have that behavior. And then you say, well, this is what we actually need in the workforce and in this workplace. So in the future, can you please do this? I think that if you want to control behavior, you need to measure it, because what you measure is what will change. So in the case of a difficult employee, I would probably sit them down quietly, have a chat to them and say, this is what I really want to see in you. and I'm going to congratulate you every time that you do this. But just know that we'll have a quiet word every time this happens.
Yep.
I think that sometimes someone who is gone askew, if you bring them back in line, they can actually end up being a really core member of the team, because they've really worked hard to get in line, and so they are very conscious about what they're trying to achieve. I think we tend to write people off very sometimes too quickly. But I say this all in the context of you need to have really tight boundaries as well.
Yeah, well said. Thank you, and thanks, Damien. Dale's asked a question here. Brilliant, thank you. Love the ABC the most. Question is, can you give us an example of a great company culture narrative / story?
Oh, wow.
How much time have we got?
Yeah.
Time.
So there are things like, Google that gives people Friday, like they come into the office, but then they have to work on any project of their own that is not Google work. And so it's kind of like a play day for them. But it sparks the curiosity, it sparks the wonder. And the benefit to the company is that all of this innovation spills off into all their other work. That's great. There is another company, I know that this is not a business company, but I know of a theater company that rather than having a 13-week rehearsal period going into a show, they split that up over 4 segments over the course of a year.
Right.
And the idea of workshopping something in detail and then letting it rest for a while allows people to work on other projects, but they weave their ideas from those projects into this, and you actually end up getting way more resources into this one project. And so I love that sort of stuff. I'm currently dealing with someone who is running a big business, and he's incredibly generous towards his staff, but he's learning how to be wise about the generosity, because he's being too generous.
Yes.
And so he's learning that there are ways that he can, like there's someone who is really good at a particular menial task, but he takes such pride in it that he's been labeled the king of doing this thing, whereas someone else is actually really good at it. This other person's technically not great, but is fantastic with dealing with customers. And so it's like, you are the hospitality king, or you're the customer service king. And it gives them a real sense of pride, and they know their place, and therefore they belong in the workplace.
Yes.
And it's not saying that they don't do any other work.
No.
It's saying, we know that you are the go-to for this.
Yes. Well said. Well answered. We've got another one here that we'll look to wrap up after this one, but it's a long one, so stay with me. I've been saying this for many years now. If you want to see if your boss is a good boss, take a close look at how they manage their close relationships. For example, if they avoid dealing with conflict at home, will they do that in the workplace? I believe this can be applied to all people in the workplace, regardless of the role. I also believe in the to be able to manage this, you will need to look at yourself in this regard. What is the line in the sand of what's considered professional in the workplace when being vulnerable and exposing who you are? Good question.
So great. So great. And you're going to see more and more of this as Gen Z comes into the workforce.
Yeah, I agree.
These lines are going to get fudged more and more. And we're also going to see people on social media doing really inappropriate things that are just not professional. And you're saying this blows your credibility in the workforce. I think that you have to be very clear, especially with the younger generations, of what is acceptable and what's not acceptable, because assumptions get made all the time on both sides. So yeah, I can do whatever I want here. I can wear whatever I want in the office. Obviously I can be on social media whenever I want. Whereas a lot of employers assume that they know, but they
Yes.
don't know because their parents, who are often the employer's generation, never taught them well to do that. So there's actually a need to parent the younger generations in the workplace as well. I would ask the question of, is this behavior adding to or detracting from the productivity and the profitability of the business? If your behavior is detracting from it, that's probably a pretty good sign that you're not operating in the best interests of the organization by sharing this. I think it is slightly different in every workplace, though. You have to be able to read the room well, because we're pack animals, right? So you might have one person who is constantly in a heightened sense of emotion. Yes, I'm not going to flesh that out more. In some circumstances, that's fantastic. That works really well, and the people can handle it. In other circumstances, it's awkward and makes other people feel really uncomfortable, and like they can't focus on their own work because I'm in fight or flight mechanism with this person's behavior. So I don't feel like that's I feel like we could go on for ages talking about that.
Absolutely,
but
I agree.
of it.
I was a little bit in fear of asking, but I knew that the person had actually gone to a lot of trouble to type it out. So I thought, I've got to go there. But that's something that you're right. We'd probably need another half an hour just to unpack, I think. But great question. I think the challenge is going to be there and that's the great thing about these, mate, we do need to wrap up. It is 1:08. Thank you, Eugene. Certainly from my point of view, been around for as long as I have, and the continual learning that I want to do, it's great to have these little sessions because you get these little triggers that go, yes, I like that. The ABC, I'm going to use that. And, I think it's been fantastic. So thank you very much for being a part of today.
Much a pleasure. It's been fun. It's great.
Mate, where would people find you? Just so if people want to ask more questions, if there's more in-depth stuff, is LinkedIn the place?
LinkedIn, Eugene Wong on LinkedIn, or strongerNarrative.com. It's great.
Beautiful. To all of you that have joined us today, thank you. I hope there was plenty of takeaways. Again, this recording will be online in the next 48 hours, so go on there. I know I'm looking forward to reviewing it again, and probably 2 or 3 times as I usually do, and work out what I can use and the benefits of now and in the future as well. So I certainly hope all of you have enjoyed the last hour and a bit that we've gone over for. I mentioned Profit Master Global before and offshoring. Now I've been running call it a lunch and learn panel session. So if you want to learn more about how the global team can work together, or how you can think about offshoring as an option, and I think we spoke about that earlier with tasks and empowering people to work at a higher level and maybe delegating lower tasks down to, let's say, a different workplace. Come and join us. It's on the 5th of September. Okay, so it's a panel I've been running. This is the second panel that we've got running. It's with Richard Croker from Profit Master Global, plus Derek Gallimore, who's very experienced in this offshore space. So if you want to come and join us again, it's a free session. It's on the 5th of September, 12 o'clock. You'll probably hear from, let's say, Delia McKenzie. I know Delia is probably listening online, and Delia will probably reach out and invite you. But we've got, again, a lot of people joining us for that session on the 5th of September. And you get the ability to ask questions, be involved, listen to what these guys are saying. And I host it, but certainly come along and find out a little bit more. And Delia will probably reach out anyway and invite you following today. So I'll sign off until I see you next time. Eugene, any final comments before we go?
Love your people. You want to get the best. You want to get the best out of them. Love your people, and they will follow you.
Brilliant. What a great piece of advice to close with. So signing off till I see you next time. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Join us at Profit Master. Passionate people, passionate careers.